to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we're your hosts. This is the lovely Kirsha Fox, author of newly released Son of Deception, an amazing book, and homeschool mom of four and avid gamer.
And this is Julia J.K. Allen. She's an editor, author, and author coach. She is a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We're super excited because we have a special guest on today. It's actually my sister and co-author of This Side of Shadows. If you want to tell them about Miss Carol Allen.
Carol has been an avid reader her whole life, but dived into writing during her downtime after working her day job as an optometrist. Obsessed with horror and the strange, she has an eclectic taste in books, and you can see it reflected in her stories. This compilation is her publishing debut, and she's very excited to share the journey with you and her co-author. She spends the rest of her time promising to knit or crochet people things.
Welcome, Carol.
Welcome, Carol.
Hello.
So, obviously, you're my sister, and the book we're referring to in the bio is This Side of Shadows. Yeah. So
First book for me. Yeah. Love the cover. I thought it was really cool. I was very excited when I saw
it. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you went from reader to writer in your little author journey.
Oh, I was going to say, it's a slow one.
Right.
And with lots of encouragement from you, actually. Mm-hmm. I think I remember trying to write a story when I was like, I want to say maybe 8th grade, maybe high school age. Mm-hmm. And it was like a murder ghost story. And it's like I thought I had a really good like setup, but then I was like, oh, how am I going to end this? So then I wasn't able to finish that story. So then I just was a reader. And then I think it was like after you started going to school for it, mm-hmm. that I was, we were talking about stuff, reading, writing, and you were telling me like all your different story ideas. And then it must have been like one of our conversations. And I'm just like, you know what, Julia, I have this weird scene in my head. Mm-hmm. Do you think I can write a story? And you're like, yeah, just write it out. And so that's the big story that big idea that I wrote so many notes on and ended up mm-hmm. writing I don't think it was super long. I want to say like probably under 10,000 words, but right. I was so proud of it because it was like more than 5 like printed out pages, and mm-hmm. so excited for you to read it. And then like you're my one and only editor, and then you're like, wow, this is good, but it's not what you were telling me about.
Right. The concept changed a little in the execution.
Yep. So yeah, because I was able to talk to you about my idea about the whole world, but with my writing skills, like I kind of turned it into more like a love story kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you're like, it's good, but I want to know about the world. So I think that's what kind of drove me to like continue to practice writing. Right. And, like you did a great like blog about like writing tips and stuff. So I was able to like read them when they first post, because I knew when they were posting because right. I know you. So it's just like from there, so it's been like over 10 years of just trying to like get better at writing. And then it was after 2020 and we had a lot of downtime that we just were able to put out the short story compilation. So like a slow but steady process.
Right. Just putting one word after the other and just getting practice with that.
Yes.
So you mentioned your early story was already sort of in the horror genre. What draws you to that genre in particular?
Oh, I love horror. I gotta say, it's like my first love. I think I accidentally started watching some scary movie, probably because my parents liked scary movies. So mm-hmm. I remember just walking by the TV and it's like, oh, what's going on here? And it's like, one of the Friday the 13th sequels. So mm-hmm. being like 4 or 5, like I I don't remember like sitting down and watching it completely, but just like walking by the TV here and there, and it's like, oh yeah, so they're gonna get killed. I'm gonna walk away for a second, you know. So
Mhm.
it's something that we grew up with, you know, Julia and I love it.
Mhm.
I think I'm a little like analytical anyways. So the big thing that I liked was like figuring out the rules. Like I
Mhm.
know like maybe monsters aren't completely real, but it's like if you show me a vampire, like I have a crucifix. If you show me a werewolf, I know a silver bullet. You know, like it's
Mhm.
like fun to figure out how to like prepare.
Right.
You know, how do
Right.
you fight these things? So
Mhm.
it's you know it's like fun to figure out the rules.
I think
And
that's one
then
of the reasons why women enjoy true crime
oh
documentaries
yeah,
so
yeah,
much.
and
Right.
Like,
yeah,
we're
that's
intrigued
another
by the
thing.
story, but also it's
Hmm.
like a little bit of a self-defense
Prepare
you know,
yourself.
mentality of, yeah,
Oh yeah,
what did those people fall for and how do I not fall to that as well?
yep,
Right. Right.
totally, totally. Yeah, and it's I think there's also like a little bit of kid logic, you know, especially since I was a kid, you know, starting to watch
Mhm.
it. Because I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I could watch Friday the 13th as a child, and it didn't scare me as much as like maybe a vampire movie because Freddy, he never really killed any kids. So like being a kid, it's like you're safe, but once you're a teenager or older, watch out. So
Right.
like
Right.
nowadays I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch that again, but
Mhm.
that's been like something that we started to do. I think Julia and I we started watching like the first Friday the 13th, and then we're going to make our way through the sequels, and then the
Mhm.
same thing with like Nightmare on Elm Street, because that was
Right.
the one we grew up with watching, like a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So it's like it'll be fun to watch those. And then, like I said, the rules with that is if you're not one of the kids of the parents that hurt him, you should be fine. So, you know, it's like not as scary.
Mhm.
You
Right.
figure out the rules and then you're okay.
Yeah, our parents had the moral quandary of like how young was too young to watch scary movies, but you know, being tag teamed by two little ones saying, "Please, please, please let us watch it," you know, they kind of were
Yeah,
like,
kind of like
"Fine," but
this, but
yeah, I would
you
sit in
still
my
want to watch
mom's
it.
lap and like have her hands in front of me and have the
Oh, yeah.
pillow. Yeah.
My younger sister watched Jurassic Park when she was like 5, and
Oh
she
yeah,
still gets
that can be
dinosaur
scary.
nightmares. It's very
Oh yeah,
funny.
yeah, that can
Right,
be scary.
right. Yeah,
Yep, yep.
those raptors, terrifying. So
They're
tell us.
smart too.
Yeah, I know, right? They figure out too much. Tell us a little bit about your writing process and how you get from idea to draft.
Okay. Well, it just can be random where I get the idea. It's I just draw from like everything and anything. So it's like something I can have a dream about something and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of an interesting scene. Like
Mhm.
what kind of person is in that scene and what's going on in that scene?" And sometimes I'll have like a conversation, you know, where if I just write that dialogue, then I can expand upon it and see if it'll grow into a story too. And sometimes it's like I'll be listening to like a song, like a CD or on my
Mhm.
radio or something like that, and like a lyric will hit me, and it's just like, oh, that's kind of nice, you know, turn of phrase or
Mhm.
nice lyric, and like what emotion is it evoking in me,
Mhm.
and you know, what kind of story can I write with that? One of the stories in this side of Shadows, I kind of got influenced. It's the story. We I think we did one like kind of like a fairy. Oh, I did one like based on like a fairy godmother,
Mhm.
and I had this idea because it was my story is called Fairy Tales Can Come True. And I kind of got this idea. It's almost like a retelling of like a Cinderella kind of type story, and I wanted like a fairy godmother. But
Mhm.
when you read the story, you can kind of see like is it really a fairy godmother or something that is like, sure, I'll be your fairy godmother, but maybe I'm not, you know.
Mhm.
And uh, I was listening to an older like Florence and the Machine
Mhm.
CD, and I should have looked up the title, but there's a lyric, something about like, just kind of like basically like cut out my heart or something. And I'm just like, huh, that's interesting. So I was able to kind of use that as like, oh, I know what I want to do for maybe the ending. So, just taking, inspiration all around. And I am I'm a stewer or a molar, so I will think on an idea or a scene or something, and if I feel like, okay, like if it's going to be, a couple pages, then I'll go ahead and like write notes on it and keep like growing it and thinking of ideas. And then I do like to think of like a bigger message sometimes, so or like a theme, to like make like a is there, why am I writing this, what's the purpose of this story, and if I can make it work, then I'll sit down with it and type it out. Yeah, I'm a big note taker too, so there's I think Julia's seen me do this maybe 2 or 3 times where I'll have a bunch of notes, and then when I'm ready to type, I will sit at my computer and I will type all day. Like, she witnessed it at least once where I was just, oh no, there was a couple times where I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm ready to type. And then it was like, I start typing in the morning, and then by that night, I had it all, at least the first draft. And she's just like, I think you were having writer's block that day. So you're like, how can you write like 1,000 words? It ended up being longer than that, but you're just like, I think you're like, I hate you. Because I'm like, oh, here, it's a couple pages. And it was actually like, I want to like probably publish that in a future short story compilation, I think. That story.
So the interesting thing though is you take notes, but you are not a plotter.
Not necessarily. It's bad. I feel okay. So I'm trying to write like a novel right now, and I have it outlined. But because I have it outlined, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do it. Like, it's hard for me to get back into it because I'm like, it's already written. So I like the idea of like, oh, going with my feelings. And sometimes I'll kind of write, like, I'll write one direction, and as I'm actually typing it out, I'm like, oh, maybe I can go another direction with it. And then it's like, oh, what's the better action? So then it'll make me like pause, and then I'll think and stew on it and write notes. But I want to say I'm like halfway through the novel, but I'm just like, oh, thinking about the big ending and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, I want it to be good. So I think that's also what's kind of like holding me back a little bit. But I have it. Yeah, I have it plotted out. I just have to get back into it because it's been, I think it's been a year since I've looked at that. So I need we had a bad year. But I'm like, okay, I think I can think about, I want to do the novel on a vampire story. So I'm like, I think I'm ready to kind of dip my toes back in the vampire story. So hopefully pretty soon. Yeah. I like pulled it up on my computer the other day, and I'm like, oh, wow. I think I have like, I want to say like 50,000 words typed.
Oh, that's a good amount.
So I'm like, okay, there's no turning back now. I've done all this work. So that's like,
that'll win you Nano.
I need to like, I think I just need to like just relax about it and just do it. And I can always fix it if I don't feel like it's good enough. So I just need to just buckle down and do it.
Yeah, good writing is in the rewriting, because I feel like we do all put pressure on ourselves to make it perfect the first go around and get it right. But a lot of times the first few drafts are just like you telling yourself the story, and then you got to make
Mhm.
it seem like, okay, now I'm telling other people the story, and I meant
Yes.
to do it this
Yes.
way. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And that's definitely like one of the things I think I've learned a lot, like from you,
Mm,
is like, well, like I have it in my head, but I just have to
right.
get it out so that you can read it. And I also have to make sure I world build, um,
Hmm.
so that like when I tell you an idea, you're like, okay, you translate it well to the page instead of being like, huh, this is more of a love story and I want it sci-fi, you know,
Right.
like
Right.
that for that
Well,
one's my first story.
okay. You're making me look back on here, but no, the thing was that she told me the concept for her story, and it was just like the most interesting thing that I'd like heard um in a while. It was like this amazing idea for her story, and then I read it, and it had nothing to do with what she talked to me about, and I was like, oh,
Because I
it's
didn't
not
world build.
bad, but I was just like, where's all the stuff we were talking about that I found so fascinating? And she was just like,
Yep.
I didn't put it in. And I'm like, well, no one's going to know if you don't put it on the page, like
Yeah, yeah,
that you had this
yeah.
great,
But
crazy idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's just my journey. So I'm hoping, like, I still like that story because I think it's a
Hmm.
great
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
story. But I think what I'm going to try and do is like write the more sci-fi story, and then like
Hmm.
maybe have them together in a
Right.
small collection. So then you can
Yeah.
see, and then it might be nice because you can hopefully see my growth,
Right.
from like the first story to like maybe the bigger story.
Hmm.
Because I will say, like, I I'm a really like brief like writer. So like if I were to describe like the scene, I'd be like, three people sitting talking, or I might even say like three women, whatever.
Right.
But I may not go into too many details about like, hair color, eye color, or even like the setting. I'll just maybe focus more on our dialogue.
Hmm.
But I'm trying to work out more of like, okay, people need to just, set the scene. We're
Right.
not just
Right.
floating, we're sitting in our chairs in our homes. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
definitely am in I was like looking at one of the stories from our book because trying to
Hmm.
we're actually working on book two. So I was telling Julie, I'm like, oh, I don't have writer's block, but I don't feel very inspired. So I'm trying to
Hmm.
edit, some of the earlier stories that I've
Hmm.
written for book two. And I'm just like, am I a good writer? Is it worth it? And then I just like
Right.
picked one of the short stories and I'm like, oh, I kind of describe some stuff. I set the scene. I'm like, I can be descriptive. I just need to
Right.
get the inspiration to edit the stories we're working on for the second book.
Yeah, it's completely okay to sort of gloss over things, the first draft,
Oh yeah.
but
Right.
on subsequent edits, you add more and more detail. You remember
Oh
to
yeah.
set the scene better and to add description. I often think of it as sort of like a painting, where
Right.
first
Oh
you
yeah.
get the sketch down, and then you start to add the base colors, and then you start to add the details, and then you put like
Right.
lighting in.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
feel like writing can definitely be the same way, right?
Oh,
Oh
for
yeah,
sure.
I
For sure.
I always tell people get the bones down and then you add like the muscles and skin and
Mhm.
finishing touches after. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I'm good about bones. I like bones, but sometimes it's hard to put the flesh on the bones.
Right, right. But that's what editing is for,
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
especially because like I feel like people who know their not, I don't want to say flaws, but like know their strengths versus
Weaknesses.
their
Yeah.
weaknesses. They think it's a bad thing to have weaknesses, but I actually think it's so helpful because then you know what to focus on for editing. That you can be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we don't have this, we don't have similar writing voices necessarily, but we have similar styles. Like we both kind of are dialogue heavy. We both kind of like gloss over some descriptors and stuff. And but knowing that in editing, that's when we're like, okay, like this is a wall of text, let's add what's
Yeah.
going on around with the people
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
and all of that stuff.
Body language.
Yeah,
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 which is,
exactly.
I loved reading like your early blog because you're like, okay, like show not tell, of course, and then you're like, five senses. Like, can you
Right.
say more than what you can see? Like, is there a smell? Is there a sound? Feelings, and then
Hmm.
yeah, body language and stuff
Right.
like that.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm trying to do for, our stories for book number 2, which is exciting.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
touched
Yeah.
on how you really like
Hmm.
to focus on the themes of your story. Like that's a very
Yes.
ever driving. What sort of themes
Yes.
have you had in the stories that you've written? Do you tend to find yourself
Um,
going back to the same themes, or do you like each one to have a new theme altogether?
I think it kind of depends on the story. I feel like it gives me a purpose and it makes it easier to be like, okay, this is going to be the ending. Um, it's kind of like the whatever vibes I'm feeling.
Mhm.
I've have a couple ideas that I want to like polish for like future publication stuff, and they're like revenge stories, like kick-ass women,
Ah,
Mhm.
taking revenge, you know and so like I want to do that. Like Julia knows about my ideas, so I think she knows like that I like to have a purpose for like different stories. And then there's like one story that's kind of like a revenge story in our first book. And
Mhm.
then
mhm.
there's a couple other stories that I think you can kind of see like hopefully like pick up on some of the feelings that I want to describe. There's one where a lady recently lost her partner, so that's like a lot of like grieving and depression kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
it's like how do people deal with loss? And that one, I feel like I said, we've had kind of a bad year, and it's like, that's human to go through like the grieving process.
Right.
It's a little different depending on who you lose in your life, but we're gonna all experience it.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I
Revenge
just
is
put that
definitely a way to deal with
into the
loss.
story, and yep. And then like us, there's we had a prompt for like basically every story. And one is like called Another Year. So in 2020 I turned the big 40. So it was kind of like, oh, getting older, got to worry about like face cream and hair dye
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Well, I've been dealing with hair dye for a while. So I just kind of put some of my feelings about that into that story. So it was like really like cathartic. And
Mhm,
that
mhm,
prompt was based on like a witch story. So you can kind of see how that witch deals with aging, because she's
Mhm.
actually a couple centuries old. So
Right.
it's like, you know, um so like I said, each like I said, I kind of felt I was going through something, so I kind of felt like, okay, I want to write about it because it's a human thing. And then one thing that I've been thinking of a lot is like the idea of like free will versus
Mhm.
like fate.
mhm.
So that's maybe a theme that I kind of like to think about. And it may not necessarily be like the main theme of the story, but it's kind of like, are we supposed to do this in our life, or
Mhm.
did we choose to do this in our life? And kind of like, would it be different if, you know, if we had made another choice? Like, some things, I think that's maybe one of the like the biggest thing that like I keep thinking about a lot. But like I said, it may not necessarily be like explicitly what the story is about, but there's a story in the book where I don't want to mess up the title, but it kind of plays with that kind of idea. Oh, it's called I'm Going Home. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like the prompt for that was a ghost story. And it's kind of like this guy is kind of a hypochondriac, and
Mhm.
he's told by like a fortune teller who actually has moments of psychic ability, kind of like you can know how you're going to die or when. And he kind of blurts out like, when, like, what do you mean when? So then he gets told 3-1. And so it's like, okay, 31 seconds, 31 minutes, 31 hours, the 31st day. Like, you know, then you're like freaking out, 31 years,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's kind of like, when you read the story, it's kind of like, okay, like, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, because he was given this nugget and he's a hypochondriac, or was he, you know, no matter what he did, was he going to die on whatever the 31 was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if he's going to die or whatever.
Right.
Spoilers, I guess. I'm sorry. So, like, that's been kind of, like I said, kind of a big idea that, you know, like I said, it kind of is just like always in my mind. So, but like I said, I don't think it's really as explicit as it is in that story specifically. I feel like that's a big one.
All right. So, what pitfalls can we avoid when we're trying to write themes into our stories? Do you have any advice for us on that?
I am like, I think I'm like a really intuitive kind of like writer, reader, and I feel like you have to get the balance right. So it's like, you know, you don't want to be too heavy-handed, whatever you want to write about. So so like I said, it's like I try to think about, like, okay, like I said, the purpose of the story, and if I can layer in like maybe symbolism or foreshadowing or just little things to like maybe think about, you know, whatever. Um, that's what I'll try to do. But again, like I said, you don't want to be too heavy-handed. So
Right.
so like I said, I hope that it's like I said, with that one story, it's like a kind of like a ghost story, and you know, you're reading about that character, and it's hopefully like, you know, you're like enjoying what you're reading, but then it's like at the end of the story, you know, if you think about like, oh, did he do it himself, or you know, like, no matter what he was going to do, was that going to be, you know, the day, you know, if it gets you thinking about it, then I would consider it a success. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's just like, you know, you don't want to be like too preachy, but at the end of the day, you also have to make sure you have a good story to tell.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So do you have any tips for writing themes? So we talked a little bit about the pitfalls, but like what can we do positively for themes?
I think it's probably going to be like, what is your intention with the story? Because there's also like a story in there where it's like, it kind of is like a revenge story, but I didn't really have to, you don't have to really go too deep. It's like an ex-girlfriend who's mad at her ex-boyfriend, you know? So like that's, you know, like again, you want to have like good suspense, or, you know, kind of like, oh, what's going to happen next? So it doesn't always have to be like too deep. But whatever you want to write, you know, as long as you know, just know what you're doing, and
Right.
as far as what you want to do with the story. And if you want to add more layers, it's probably going to be more in like the editing. Like, okay,
Right.
so you know, where can I do this? And it's just like, you know, I'm a big fan of like writing notes on a notebook or a piece of paper or whatever. And it's like, if something hits you, like, you know, write it, you know, write that note. And maybe even if it doesn't work for this story, if it works for another story, that might be great.
Right.
And I have also like come to terms with like, you know, practice makes perfect, you know, and
Right.
you know, I've said like there's a couple stories that I would love to like polish and publish, but I'm also like looking at some of my other stories and I'm like, you know what, that was a good write, you know, good effort. Maybe it's a good story, something you know, I'm like learning lessons with each work in
Right.
progress. So not everything that is in my back catalog of ideas, I'm like, you know, I don't have to publish everything. You know,
No.
that
Yeah.
was I practiced that. I learned, oh, editing from this project, and you
Right.
know, I got this idea out, and okay, I kind of learned like what I like, what I don't like to write about, you know, whatever. And then
Right.
like there's a couple that I'm really like excited that I would love to have published. So, you know, I'm just trying to like look at everything as a lesson, and
Yeah,
like maybe it doesn't have to be, polished into something to be published,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's yeah, so it's just like, practice, 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 read, write, um,
Hmm.
uh
There's no wasted
watch.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, watch movies, because like I said, I think because I've kind of fallen into this because of my love of reading, and
Hmm.
I've discovered I like writing, because I want to tell a story
Hmm.
myself.
Right.
That, like I said, I feel like I'm really like intuitive. Like I kind of started learning like sentence or well, sentence structure and then story structure, like from Julia's old blogs. But
Hmm.
it's like, oh, well, we kind of know that because most of us have watched like all the big movies like Star
Right.
Wars, and
Right.
so we all have heard about the hero's journey and stuff, and three
Hmm.
act structure and stuff like that. So I think it's like, even though I may not have learned it like in school, I feel like it's it's worked out okay. And then you have to have a good editor who knows that stuff.
I
So
agree.
Julia's
A
helped
good
me.
editor is
Yeah.
crucial.
Ah!
Yeah, 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 yeah. So she's helped me to like, yeah, fix what I need to fix.
Right.
So
Right.
always trying to be better. That's all we can do.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite part of writing?
I think the ideas just
Right.
coming up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, hey, this is a weird scene. What do you think about that? And it's like, huh, okay. So then, okay, I can see where this guy is going to say something weird, and then something weird's going to happen.
Hmm.
And so that's that. I think I really love, which is probably bad because that's probably why I have like so many. Well, I finished some stuff. Nothing, not everything's published, like I said, but I finished a lot of my early ideas. But I just have like so many ideas in a notebook that I'm like, oh, I just need to sit down and write that because that
Right.
could be a good story.
Right.
So, like, so
I
I
think
can
that's a
start.
common struggle,
Yeah,
is to
I
have
can
more
start stuff.
ideas than time to write.
Yeah, that's definitely, yep, yep. So,
Right.
still early in the new year, so I don't do like New Year's resolutions, but I've been like, okay, let me like try to read a chapter a day. Let me try and write a little
Hmm.
bit, a week,
Hmm.
and, kind of just get back into it.
Yeah. Small, obtainable goals, like a little
Right.
bit at a time.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, what is your least favorite part of writing then?
Probably looking at the finished product and like the bones are written, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I got to describe something, don't I? And then trying to like change up sentence structure
Hmm.
and word flow, and like I said, this last week I've been trying to do that with one of the newer stories, and I'm like, I just am not inspired, so I have to find some kind of, I think, music playlist, and then like get inspired, and then I'll probably hopefully be able to flower it up a little bit and make it more
Hmm.
descriptive and look at the word flow. Julia knows that I'm horrible with my first draft because it's like, he said this, he walked in the room, she did this, she did that. And she's like, you can't start every sentence with he or she.
Right.
So
Right.
I have to change it up. So like I
Yeah.
said, it'll get there. It's just I'm just like, oh,
Right.
I
We all
want to
kind of
send
wish
the
we
words
wrote
out. I mean, yeah.
cleaner first drafts than we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not alone in that, though. I feel like
Oh, yeah, no.
we all
Yeah.
struggle with that.
Yeah.
So do you have writing advice that you really like and that you would share with a new author?
Um, I think it's like just like, just kind of be open. I think you have to know the rules to break the rules too.
Hmm.
So like I said, it's been great like looking at like your old, writing blogs and like kind of like learning a little bit more, and like, trying to like I said, look at the five senses, because we don't live in just a visual world, or we don't live in just, it's one thing. It's like, no, it's a blend of everything.
Hmm.
So I think it's just, just trying to like keep that in mind. I think it's like, just like I said, like whatever you want to write, like what's the purpose, and then that's going to let you know like how deep you want to go with it. Because if you're just writing, like I just want to write an action story and just make sure it's fast paced and lots of stuff is happening and whatever, you may not have to necessarily go that deep into it with like, oh, I want this to be about life or death.
Right.
But if you want to go deeper, like, okay, that's good. I remember taking AP English in high school, and my I think one of the first things we had to write was like, what do we like reading, and who do we, as an author, who do we love, and stuff like that. And I remember writing, oh, I love Stephen King. Even in high school, I found him in middle school and can't get enough of him. And my teacher was like, oh, you might not like him so much once you know about like literature. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, he is he is a little more maybe what you call like escapism. But I've read a book, or each book I read by him, it's kind of like his characters are like, he can do like the everyman, and it just is like relatable. A lot of his like main characters or protagonists, you can kind of like, he's just like a normal person, or she, some of his female characters. And it's like, there's one book that was, it was the one where he talks about the JFK assassination one. It's a big book, and it's not my favorite, but I did read it, and it took me a while to get through it because it's not my favorite. But when I was done with that book, I was like, you know what? This was a character study for that main character. And, you spent like 2 years with him because he travels back in time. I think it was like about a 2-year time thing. And, it was like interesting, like American, looking at a slice of Americana, in the 60s, and then, through that guy's eyes kind of thing. And like, it wasn't a lot of like the spooky stuff that maybe we would expect, but I still feel like, wow, that was a really good like character study. You, did I like other books by him better? Yeah, but I think it's still like, like he can, obviously he's a bestseller, so he's a good writer that way. And like I said, everything has its purpose. So I think like one of the first things they have you read is like The Most Dangerous Game, and then A Lady or a Tiger, and some other stories too. And it's like, one's really escapism, one's supposed to be like more literature, and there's deeper meaning. And I'm like, The Most Dangerous Game, sure, that's escapism, but it was a fast-paced, action-packed, like, is this guy going to make it, or not?
Right.
I thought it was very, very good read. Of course, this is me as a high schooler, and I don't really know how to use commas properly. And I'm still, I didn't learn that until college, if I'm going to be honest, and like I got through English and stuff. And, but like I said, maybe I didn't really know all the rules, but, like I said, intuitively, I knew like, oh, this is fine. Maybe there's no symbolism, but you don't need that every day.
No, there's
you just
definitely merit to be found in genre fiction as well, because like you said, they
for
do
sure
have depth to them, and good characters, and the other stuff,
yeah
as well as the escapism.
yeah And if that's going to get someone into their foot in the door of reading, and then later they can read, like, whatever literature, then that's great, because I can appreciate, something that is a little more like literary. But sometimes that you have to want to read that to get, to get through it. So
what influenced your writing?
Oh, influences. I think I touched on this a little earlier. Like real world, sometimes, something will happen, and I'm like, I wonder if this would be like, if this could be a spark of something. And then I have had like some interesting dreams, and it's just like,
that's your inspiration, but what influences?
Influences.
Like would you say that there's like a certain author you like to emulate, or a movie, or
okay.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm a visual person.
Mhm.
So I do think in like pictures and like movies kind of
Right.
thing. So it's like definitely can like see like a scene in my mind and then like try to like write what I'm seeing.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I was trying to think of this question earlier, I talked about Stephen King, and like I said, I've read so much of him that I think I like I said earlier, like I like the way he writes like normal people and they're just in
Mm.
these crazy situations.
Right.
So I think like that feels like really relatable. So I try to when I write try to like keep that in mind, like relatable, like,
Right.
because I feel like the stories that people really like, it's like, the character, they fall in love with the character somehow
Oh,
or some
absolutely.
way,
Yeah.
and either they relate to them or they feel something, that the character's going through, or that they can see like themselves in, or kind of make them think what would they do if they were in that situation too.
Right.
um I love horror, and I also love like mysteries, and
Mhm.
I also like true crime stuff too. So I will read mysteries as well, and we love all those kind of movies as well too. So I probably lately have been watching a lot more like TV and movies than reading.
Mhm.
Definitely want to get back into reading though. But I just love like like Agatha Christie, and just that idea, Sherlock Holmes, and just like that kind of idea of like, um if there's this mystery, like, if they can solve it or not. I haven't really written too many like mystery stuff, but it's like that idea of like foreshadowing, if you can drop a
Mhm.
clue here and there, like I try to like maybe sprinkle that in some of the stories, to like build on like a theme or something too. So it's like you take ideas, from different things, and
Right.
you know, uh like, right into it. And then I know like I've read, lots of Julia's stuff, and I know she's said that she likes the idea of magic in real world stuff. And I feel like that's interesting too. It may not, for me, may not always be like a magical element. I kind
Mhm.
of like the idea of like supernatural.
Right.
So some of my, a lot of my stories ideas, kind of have like, well, for horror, of course, we have to do something somewhat scary and supernatural. But I really like that idea of like, maybe a psychic kind of power,
Mhm.
or something. So I like, like kind of sprinkling that in if it's applicable to a
Sure.
story. I was gonna say I read, it was a couple years ago now, The Ocean at the End of the Lane by
Mhm.
Neil Gaiman. And that was beautiful. It was kind of like a character like remembering his childhood.
Mhm.
So it's not like, it could be present day, and then it was almost like a fairy tale, because there was like, it seemed like some magical stuff going on, and there's
Mhm.
also maybe some like kind of like bad stuff happening and stuff. And it was just like, oh, like, not necessarily like a retelling of a fairy tale, but it was just, I kind of like that idea of like good storytelling.
Mm.
So
Right.
I try to, make sure that, the words I use, the flow is okay.
Mhm.
I have been trying to do that idea of like reading out loud
Right.
what you write. I don't think I've really done that too much, like reading out loud, just like rereading. And I think I'm
Mhm.
gonna try and do that more going forward, just so it's like, if you're gonna, not that you're necessarily gonna read it out loud to
You can get the
somebody,
flow and
but
the rhythm of the words.
yeah,
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 absolutely.
but yeah.
So, what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
I think it's gonna be this,
Mhm.
working with you to get this out there, because like
Mhm.
I said, it's well, first thing published. So
Right.
that definitely is a nice thing.
Right.
Yes.
Um yeah,
Publishing
yeah,
this book is
yeah,
Congratulations
definitely
on
a big
yeah.
yeah,
writing victory.
yeah, and then we have like one 5-star review. So it was, yeah, that was cool to have, someone like read it and
Give
like
feedback.
leave a nice rating. Like
Hmm.
that was, yeah, that was really nice. And yeah, it's just like, yeah, it's like, okay, like these things are rattling in my brain. Let me get them out there, and
Right.
hopefully it makes someone, think about something, in a way. you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we know this
Uh,
is an impossible question, but do you
yeah.
have a favorite book or author?
So I've mentioned a couple already, and I
Mhm.
was trying to think of something or someone that, that I like, but maybe I haven't mentioned already. And I was like talking, or thinking about this earlier, and I was like, you know what? I also like Ray Bradbury.
Mm.
I never would have thought I would have liked something a little more sci-fi, like when I was a child or younger. If you told me this is sci-fi, I'm like, no, that's not my jam. Give me a murder mystery, give me something scary.
Right.
But I've seen the movie like Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I bought, or maybe Julia gifted me the book because I'm like, I want to read that book because the
Hmm.
movie was awesome. And there's like ideas that kind of make you think, like it kind of reminds me of like the monkey's paw, like,
Mm.
be careful what you wish for. And
Right.
like I love that idea, and I've written a story like similar with that idea in mind. Again, it may not ever be published, but like I said,
Right.
it's part of the journey. But like I'm wanting to read that for the first time, and see, I mean, obviously it has to be good.
Mm.
And then I remember reading like the Martian Chronicles in high
Okay.
school, and actually maybe Julie gifted me that too, but I want to reread that because there's it's like I think a lot of little stories, and
Mhm.
it's, they're good reads, and at the end of them it's like, wow, it's, some kind of social commentary, or makes you think about, technology and
Yeah,
things.
they're thought provoking.
Yes, yes. So I think that, he's probably, been like a little bit of a sneaky influence. And um,
Hmm.
I um, I think there was like maybe a TV show, because I bought a DVD set, and it's just like a bunch of like, short story, or short, like I think it's like, it must have been a TV show kind of format.
Yeah, it
And
was.
just like watching, yeah, just like watching those, it's just like, wow, it's kind of, it speaks to me on a theme level. And
Hmm.
they can be character studies on whatever's going on, and like, yeah, it just really gets you
Yeah,
thinking.
he's largely thematic in a lot of his
Yeah,
writing. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And then finally, I could ask my favorite question I like to ask people: what is writing advice you hate?
um I'm not sure if I've heard anything too bad. Like I said, I'm like an eager learner. Like, tell
Hmm.
me anything, and I'll like devour it. Or, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I can't really think of anything that I've heard
Hmm.
that was bad.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough. We won't make
Yeah,
you
yeah.
lie on camera. So,
Yeah, yeah.
now you don't have social media. So if anyone would like to get a hold of Carol or have a message for her, you can always go on my website, hijinkswriter.com, and contact us, and I will pass that message along. But do you want to talk a little bit about This Side of Shadows or book two that's upcoming? We just like to give you time to talk.
Sure, sure. So This Side of Shadows is available like on Amazon,
Mhm.
and Julia's website, which she can tell you about. This was really like a work of love. Like we wrote each story by ourselves, but we both looked at different prompts, or the same prompts, I should say, and then came
Mhm.
up with our story ideas based on that. And so I find that that's really interesting because you can tell someone like write a ghost story, and what are they going to write about? Is it going to
Right.
be like a revengeful ghost, or is it someone who is sad, and about what happened to them, and they're just, they just can't move on, or like that is so open. And I
Mhm.
thought that was great. And it's funny because, I kind of told you, like, Julia, you have you had written like two short stories. Well, one's kind of long. And I was
Mhm.
like, you should put this in some kind of book. And you're like, I need more stories. Give me some
Right.
prompts. So then I wrote a bunch of prompts down, and then you're like, I don't think it's going to be long enough. Why don't you write some stories? And I'm like, what?
Right.
I'm like, okay, if you think so. And it was great. Like I said, it happened to coincide with quarantine in 2020. So like I said, uh, some of the stories I felt like was a way of like getting stuff out,
Mhm.
so it was a little cathartic. Uh, and I even have a story in there called like a ghost story in the time of coronavirus,
Right.
so it's just like, okay, that's my, ode to that time in our lives, and
Mhm.
I did a little bit of a murder mystery kind of thing, and it was based on the ghost story prompt too. So it's like
Right.
very interesting, and I call it the bonus story, because if you read it, like, there's a question mark on if it really qualifies as a ghost story. So I said,
Mhm.
let's just put it in as a bonus, and I'll write a real ghost story,
Right.
Um, so like that was like really fun because we kind of bounced ideas off each other a little bit, and
Mhm.
then to come up with two like totally different stories. One prompt was like a mommy and me story, so it's like
Mhm.
interesting to see like what your story was, and then like how my story was, and
Mhm.
they're like similar yet different. you
Right. Right. Obviously,
know
two different writers, so yeah, I
yep,
can get
yep, yep.
two different
So
ideas, but you can see the commonalities. Mhm.
yes, yes. And then the exciting thing about book two is we took one idea, and was it my idea? I think I kind of had this idea. I wanted to do like an animation, and then I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, so I had this idea, and then you were like, we got to write it for book two. And I was like, what? So that story in book two is going to be actually written by both of us.
Right.
So, we've done, like, I want to say like a couple drafts. So we just got to do like maybe one or two final drafts,
Right.
and then that story will be ready, and then the other ones are going to be like the same thing. We have the same prompt, but we're going to have, two different stories because we're not
Yeah.
writing like together like that. So that is exciting to like
Yeah, that's gonna
be
be our
able to.
bonus story. Mhm. For
Yes,
the
yes,
second book.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep, so that was
Well,
fun.
yeah, it was so wonderful having you on.
Ah, thank
Thank you
you.
so much for joining us. And thank you to our listeners at home. Thank you so much for listening. Um, and remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. So if you are interested in being a guest on our show, you can contact us on our social media at the Telmont Show or at thetelmontshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much again. And join us for our next episode.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrunner.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.